Job, chapter 3, verses 1 through 26, King James Version. After this opened Job his mouth, and cursed his day. Let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which it was said, There is a man-child conceived. Let that day be darkness. Let not God regard it from above, neither let the light shine upon it. Let darkness and the shadow of death stain it. Let a cloud dwell upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. As for that night, let darkness seize upon it. Let it not be joined unto the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. Lo, let that night be solitary. Let no joyful voice come therein. Let them curse it that curse the day, who are ready to raise up their mourning. Let the stars of the twilight thereof be dark. Let it look for light, but have none. Neither let it see the dawning of the day. Because it shut not up the doors of my mother's womb, nor hid sorrow from mine eyes. Why died I not from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? Why did the knees prevent me, or why the breasts that I should suck? For now should I have lain still and been quiet, I should have slept, then had I been at rest. With kings and counselors of the earth, which built desolate places for themselves, or with princes that had gold, who filled their houses with silver. Or as an hidden untimely birth I had not been, as infants which never saw light. There the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary be at rest. There the prisoners rest together. They hear not the voice of the oppressor. The small and great are there, and the servant is free from his master. Wherefore is light given to him that is in misery, and life unto the bitter in soul, which long for death, but it cometh not, and dig for it more than for hid treasures, which rejoice exceedingly, and are glad when they can find the grave. Why is light given to a man whose way is hid, and whom God hath hedged in? For my sighing cometh before I eat, and my roarings are poured out like the waters. For the thing which I greatly feared is come upon me, and that which I was afraid of is come unto me. I was not in safety, neither had I rest, neither was I quiet, yet trouble came.
Hashtag Deep Dive Q&A on Job 3 verses 1 through 26. Context and structure. Question: what has happened before this passage begins? Answer: Job has lost everything: his children, his wealth, his health. He's covered in painful sores, sitting in ashes. His wife has told him to curse God and die. 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, had arrived and sat with him in silence for 7 days and nights because his suffering was so great. Job 3 breaks that silence. Question: what is the significance of Job opening his mouth after 7 days of silence? Answer: the 7 days of silence represent the depth of grief that transcends words. When Job finally speaks, it's not to curse God, as Satan predicted and his wife suggested, but to curse the day of his birth. This shows Job's integrity. He directs his anguish at his own existence rather than at God, though his words reveal profound theological struggle. Question: what is the literary structure of this passage? Answer: the passage moves through 3 movements. 1, verses 3 through 10, cursing the day of his birth and the night of his conception. 2, verses 11 through 19, wishing he had died at birth, describing death as rest. 3, verses 20 through 26, questioning why God gives life to those in misery. Question: why does Job curse both the day of his birth and the night of his conception? Answer: Job wants to erase his existence entirely. The day represents his entry into the world. The night represents the moment his life began. By cursing both, he wishes to unexist, to erase not just his current suffering, but his entire timeline. This is comprehensive despair. Question: what does Job mean by wanting that day to be darkness? Answer: Job reverses Genesis 1, where God created light and called it good. He wants his birthday to be unmade, uncreated, returned to chaos and void. He asks that God not regard it from above, essentially requesting that God forget that day ever existed, removing it from divine memory and the cosmic order. Question: what does the shadow of death that Job wants to stain his birthday mean? Answer: the Hebrew term is samluveth, meaning deep darkness or death shadow. Job wants the darkness of death itself to claim and contaminate that day, making it a day of mourning rather than celebration. He wants every marker of terror, blackness of the day, to make it a day that frightens rather than welcomes. Question: who are them that curse the day, who are ready to raise up their mourning? Answer: this likely refers to professional cursers or sorcerers believed to have power over cosmic forces, perhaps those who could supposedly curse days or conjure Leviathan, the chaos monster. Job wants the most powerful cursers imaginable to pronounce doom on his birthday. It shows the intensity of his wish for non-existence. Question: what is the meaning of verse 10? Because it shut not up the doors of my mother's womb. Answer: this is Job's reason for cursing his birth, because his conception and birth were allowed to proceed. If the doors, womb, had been closed, he never would have been born, and thus never would have known this sorrow. He views his birth itself as the source of his suffering. Question: why does Job ask, why died I not from the womb? Answer: Job transitions from wishing he'd never been conceived to wishing he had been stillborn. This is a progression of his lament. If he couldn't be prevented from existing, at least he could have died immediately. Death at birth would have spared him the suffering he now endures. Question: what is the significance of the knees and the breasts in verse 12? Answer: these represent the acts of welcome and nurture that brought him into life. In ancient culture, a father would place a newborn on his knees to acknowledge the child. The mother's breasts provided sustenance. Job questions why these mercies were shown to him when they only prolonged his path to suffering. Question: how does Job describe death in verses 13 through 19? Answer: Job presents death as the great equalizer and place of rest. It's a quiet sleep and rest. Verse 13. Kings, counselors, and princes are there. Verses 14 and 15. The wicked stop causing trouble. Verse 17. The weary find rest. Verse 17. Prisoners are free from oppressors. Verse 18. Social hierarchies dissolve. Small and great are equal. Servants are free. Verse 19. This is not a description of hell or punishment, but of death as release and peace. Question: is Job expressing a desire for suicide? No. Job wishes he had never been born or had died at birth, both passive states. He's not planning to take his own life, but expressing the depth of his misery by wishing his existence had never occurred. This is lament, not suicidal ideation. Question: what is Job's central question in verses 20 through 23? Answer: why does God give life to those who are miserable? Job questions the purpose of existence when that existence is only suffering. He specifically asks why life is given to those in misery, verse 20, the bitter in soul, verse 20, those who long for death but can't find it, verse 21, those whose way is hid and whom God has hedged in, verse 23. Question: what does it mean that some dig for death more than for hid treasures, verse 21? Answer: this vivid image shows people desperately searching for death with the intensity of treasure hunters. They would welcome death with the same joy others would feel finding gold. It illustrates how extreme suffering inverts normal human desires. Question: what does whose way is hid and whom God has hedged in mean? Answer: this is deeply ironic. Earlier, Job 1:10, Satan complained that God had hedged in Job with protection. Now Job feels hedged in by suffering, trapped with no escape and no visible path forward. The protective hedge has become a prison fence. Job feels enclosed by God's actions with no understanding of why. Question: what is the significance of Job's physical symptoms in verses 24 and 25? Answer: Job's sighing comes before he eats. His suffering is more immediate than even hunger. His groans pour out like waters, continuously, uncontrollably. The thing he feared the most has come upon him, suggesting Job may have always had an underlying anxiety that has now been realized. His suffering is both physical and psychological. Question: what does verse 26 reveal about Job's state? Answer: I was not in safety, neither had I rest, neither was I quiet, yet trouble came. This suggests either 1. Job never felt truly secure even in his prosperity, always fearing disaster, or he had no time to recover, trouble came suddenly without warning or pause. Either way, it emphasizes the relentlessness of his suffering. Even if there was a moment of peace, it was shattered by catastrophe. Theological and literary significance. Question: is Job sinning by speaking this way? Answer: the book's prologue establishes that Job did not sin with his lips, Job 2:10. While Job's friends will later accuse him of wickedness for questioning God, the narrator never condemns Job's lament. Honest anguish and questioning are not presented as sin. False accusations and religious platitudes are the actual errors in the book. Question: how does this passage relate to the book's larger themes? Answer: this lament establishes the central tension. How can righteous suffering be explained? Job's integrity is shown in his refusal to curse God, but his willingness to question God's purposes. The book explores whether faith can survive when the theological equations righteousness equals blessing break down. Question: what is the literary power of Job cursing his birth rather than cursing God? Answer: it shows the sophistication of Job's faith. He directs his rage at the safest target, himself and his own existence. This maintains his loyalty to God while expressing genuine torment. It also raises profound questions about the value of existence itself when suffering becomes unbearable. Question: how does this passage speak to human suffering today? Answer: Job 3 gives voice to profound despair in a way that Scripture rarely does. It validates the experience of those who suffer unbearably, showing that such feelings can be expressed honestly before God. It doesn't provide easy answers, but it creates space for authentic lament. The passage shows that questioning God is different from abandoning God, and that faith can include profound struggle and honest darkness.
If this content is reaching you and helping you, please like and subscribe. It will help our algorithm for others to find us.